Hello, I'm Buck Surdu. I'm the developer and author of Combat Patrol World War II, which is a new set of World War II skirmish rules that features a really unique card-driven process for resolving all the actions in the game, to include firing, melee, hand-to-hand combat, throwing grenades, etc. So Combat Patrol uses a special deck of cards. You can purchase either set A or set B. You need one or the other to play the game, although both allows you to play with more players. This is 225 cards. That's 4 50-card action decks, which you'll see in this video, and an activation deck. So other than the fact that the colors on the backs of the cards are different between set A and set B, the decks are identical. So if you get both A and B, you get 8 different colored backs, which allows 8 to 16 players to play the game, if you like those large games. So in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how direct fire combat resolution is performed in Combat Patrol, because it is a bit unique. In Combat Patrol, you have 2 kinds of decks of cards. The first is the activation deck, and that's used to determine the sequence of play during the game. And the second is the action deck. Now, the action deck can really support up to 2 players. Some people prefer to have their own deck, and so that's why there are 8 different action decks, so that each player potentially could have their own if you want. I won't talk a lot about activation in this particular video. However, briefly, each team leader or squad leader at the beginning of the turn rolls a 6-sided die, and then we flip cards from the activation deck, and that determines the sequence during the turn. And then at the end of the turn, everybody re-rolls their 6-sided dice, and we reshuffle the activation deck to determine the sequence for the next turn. So in this particular scenario, for purposes of demonstration, I have a U.S. airborne squad equipped mostly with M1 carbines. Along this wall and in this wood line, this is a BAR team, and this is the recon team, which belongs to the squad leader. And then over here we have 2 German teams comprising a squad. We have the rifle team and the machine gun team. So the first card we draw from the activation deck is a 4. The only unit with a 4 is this squad leader here and his 2 men in the recon team. So we flip the first card over on the action deck, and we look at the movement arrow. Now, it turns out that if we look at the unit's record sheet, this team, their guts rating is elite. Guts is like morale. So we come on this card here, and we see that elite says 7, which means the unit can move 7 inches. So the squad leader elects to stay where he is, but the recon team moves out to try to get to this hill and see what's on the other side of it. The next card we draw from the activation deck is a 6. So the team that has a 6 on the table is this German team over here, this rifle team. So we're going to flip the next card over, and we're going to see by looking here that for a regular unit, this gives a movement result of 6 inches. Now this team is moving in the woods, so their movement distance is cut in half. So instead of moving 6 inches, this team will move 3 inches. They all move to the edge of the woods. Now in the rules, you have to be at the edge in order to fire out, or for folks to fire in at you. Notice we keep moving the die because we need to know their activation order. They may get to activate more than once during the turn. So the next activation is a 2. This airborne team here, equipped with M1 carbines, has their command die is a 2, so it's their turn to activate. They elect to shoot. Now, if we look at the unit's record, we see that they're armed with M1 carbines, and that an M1 carbine has a short range of 6 inches, a medium range of 12, and a long range of 24. So it turns out that these figures are more than 6 inches away. The shooters are more than 6 inches away, but less than 12. So this shot is considered to be at medium range. Now the way we resolve combat is by flipping cards from the action deck. And so I will flip the first card, we will go from the shooter's left to right, and then the targets we're going to hit are also going to be resolved from the shooter's left to right. So all of these figures have M1 carbines. They all have accuracies of regular. So I flip the first card. Now the way you read this card is, I'm looking at these circles or bubbles across the top of the card. And notice that some of them have bullet holes and some of them are black circles. The black circles denote misses. So also under these circles, and it's probably a little difficult to read, we have an E, an R, and a G. That's elite, regular, and green, and that corresponds to the accuracy rating of the shooter. So looking over the R for regular, this team has an accuracy of regular. Looks like that should be a hit. However, remember I said that they're at medium range. So the other thing I notice off this card, right, is that there are shifts to the right. If the target is moving, if the leader isn't present to direct fire, if I'm wounded, or if the target is at medium range. There are 2 shifts to the right if the target's at long range or the shooter is moving. Now in this case, the target is at medium range. So I move from an R over 1, and now that's a black filled in circle, so that's a miss. So the next card I flip says, has all black circles, so that's going to be a miss, but also written across the card are the words out of ammunition. So that means that the shooter, either his weapon jammed or he fumbled finding a magazine or whatever. In any event, what we do is we mark that shooter with a red marker of some sort. I use these little rubber bands, a little marker to denote that he is out of ammo and will have to spend his next activation reloading before he can shoot again. The third person's going to shoot. I flip the card over. You see I have 4 circles. Now remember I only need 3, so that's considered a hit, and now I need to figure out who I hit and how much damage I did. So I flip the first card over, and it says figure number 1 has been hit in the lower abdomen and he's incapacitated. Right? And if I look down here, I do not see trees as cover, which means that he gets no protection, cover protection from that shot. So person number 1, from the shooter's perspective, that's this figure here, is incapacitated. Now when he's incapacitated, the other thing I do is I find his team leader and I put a morale marker on him, and that's going to remind me before his next activation that he has to conduct morale checks. So the third person's going to shoot. The third person also gets a hit, because remember I'm looking for the third circle. There's a bullet hole there, so that's a hit. And I flip this card over and I see person number 3 has been wounded in the lower leg. So person number 3, counting from the last figure hit, is 1, 2, 3. That's the team leader. Now he's wounded in the leg. However, you see the tree icon. So since he's in the woods, he's protected by the cover, so that wound is now converted into a stun. Okay. And now I have another figure to shoot. He flips the card over. He gets a miss. All the circles are filled in, so that's all a miss. The last figure to shoot from the airborne team gets a third circle filled in with a bullet hole, so that's going to be a hit. And I flip this card over to determine the effect, and that says figure number 1 has been incapacitated, and note there's no cover here. So figure number 1 from the last figure hit is this one. He is incapacitated. Right? He gets no cover benefit, and the team leader gets a second morale marker. The next unit to activate is a 5. The only team on the table that has a 5 for its command die is this German team here, consisting of 2 riflemen, one of whom is the team leader, and this 3-man machine gun team. So the player elects that he wants to move up onto the hill so that he can gauge the Americans. So we flip the next card over, the next action deck card, and here it says that a regular unit can move up to 6 inches. So I lose 2 inches for going up the slope. So I only get to move 4 inches. So I move to here with these 2 folks, and the machine gun team moves to there, and their activation is now complete. So I flip the next card. The next card is also a 5, so this team's going to get to go a second time. The player could fire this machine gun team as a light machine gun, but he elects instead to set them up so that next turn they can fire as a medium machine gun and have these 2 riflemen shoot at the Americans in the open. So I flip the next card. The next card has all misses across the top, and it says out of ammunition. So the first figure to shoot, happens to be the team leader, is out of ammunition or jammed. The next figure shoots, he gets a hit. Note that there's plenty of circles here. I really only need 2. This unit's regular, and with that rifle I'm at short range. And so I have more than the 2 that I need, so I get a hit. I flip the next card over. The next card says I am incapacitated. Figure number 5. Remember, I go from the shooter's left. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This figure is incapacitated. He's in the open, so there's no cover to protect him. And the leader, who's still way back here behind the wall, he picks up a morale marker. The next card from the activation deck is a 1. So this means any units on the table that have a 1 as their command die get a chance to activate. In this case, this BAR team here has a 1, and the player elects that he wants to fire at this German machine gun team before that German machine gun team actually gets a chance to fire at them. Now, something to note is that some weapons have rates of fire greater than 1. In this case, the BAR at short range, out to 12 inches, which this is, have a rate of fire of 2. So the BAR gets to fire 2 shots, which means I flip 2 cards to determine whether or not he gets a hit. So the first card drawn is this one, and you'll see that it has 4 bullet holes. I only need 2. This is a regular unit, and we're at short range, so there's no modifiers. So that would be this one. So I get a hit. So now I'm going to flip the next card to see how much damage I've done. So the next card says figure number 2 is wounded in the leg. Now if I look at the cover icons across the bottom, I see bunker, foxhole, window, wall, and low obstacle. In this case, because I'm firing uphill at somebody who's at the crest of the hill, the military crest as defined in the game, he gets the benefit of the foxhole cover. So instead of being wounded, the gunner is in fact stunned, and we'll mark him with a stun marker. So I'll fire the next shot. Remember, the BAR gets to fire twice. The next shot is also a hit. Again, I only needed 2. I have 4. So let's see what the effect is. The effect says figure number 5 is incapacitated. He's hit in the head, and no cover protects him. So let's see. Starting from the last figure hit, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This figure is incapacitated in the head, so I mark him I knock him over, and I mark the leader with a morale check marker to denote that he's going to have to make a morale check in a subsequent turn. The next card from the activation deck is a 4. Now recall that the 4s already went earlier in the turn. That was the squad leader when he sent his recon team forward. Now the squad leader, he's got a green morale marker on him. So before he can activate or do anything, he has to actually get rid of that morale marker. So you do that by drawing a card from the activation deck. So I draw a card and I look at the morale portion, which is at the bottom of the card. And in this case it says, "This place ain't healthy, Corporal. Figure with the lowest guts, if he's in the open, runs 10 inches toward cover or away from the enemy and becomes stunned. And if he's in cover, he just becomes stunned." Now, it turns out that both of these figures have the same guts rating of regular, so I now have to flip another card to determine which figure is affected by the morale marker. And in this case, I draw a card that says 5. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's this figure. He is in the open. So I read the open result, and it says, again, runs 10 inches toward cover or away from the enemy and becomes stunned. So I run 10 inches toward cover. So that takes him 8, gets him right to the edge of the wall, and then he'll stay along the wall because that's kind of safe and makes sense, and then he becomes stunned. Now he moved, so his turn is over. when you move or fire as a result of the morale check, then your turn is done. Now, this guy gets to remove the morale marker. I've now completed that morale check, and he hasn't done anything yet this turn. So the morale check is over, so he can do something. In this case, what he's going to do is he's got a rifle, and he's going to take a shot at the Germans up here, this infantryman up here at the top of the hill. And I flip a card, and he's a regular with a carbine at medium range. And so he would need to have the third bubble have a bullet hole in it. He doesn't, so we miss, and his activation is over. The next card I flip says re-roll and reshuffle. And what that means is the turn is over. So everybody's going to re-roll all their six-sided dice, because that may be different in the next turn. Everybody reshuffles their action decks together, all the players, and then the game master or one of the players who's ever doing it reshuffles the action deck or activation deck. So once all the six-sided dice are re-rolled, all the action decks are reshuffled, and the activation deck is reshuffled, we can start the next turn. So that concludes this brief demonstration for how combat resolution works in Combat Patrol. I think you've seen that resolution of a variety of actions, shooting, movement, morale, and we didn't cover in this demonstration throwing grenades or indirect fire, but I think you can see how the resolution of those things is very streamlined through the use of these cards. You'll notice during all of this I never consulted a big chart card, and I could just do my actions very, very quickly, particularly once you get used to this kind of a novel paradigm. So I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration, and I hope you enjoy playing Combat Patrol.